Super. I just want to tell you about a Twitter hashtag we have for this event. It's over here. So it's forum0099, and John here at least will be summarizing some things and sending them to this. And we plan on later on putting on the screen his and if you as well tweet to this, just whatever some of your observations are throughout the day. One other thing, for all those who are presenting, we've had a request from the organisers whether they can keep your presentations for learning purposes. If you don't want to, let me know. Our first presentation in this, so for the next stage until lunchtime, we've got two presentations. Still in the general area of the role of law and climate change adaptation. And then we'll be back into our breakout groups, building on some of the work, the same group, building on some of the work we did earlier. Our first presenter back is Untitled Chapter, who's with the SARO office of IUCN, and I'll pass it on to him to present.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As been introduced, my name is Abdallah Said Shah. I work as the head of office for IUCN Tanzania. It's a bit strange that I'm presenting to a law group, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm a forester by profession. I'll try my best to impress lawyers anyway. The background here is that we had a project, and this project aimed at improving coherence and resilience planning and protection of natural resources by enhancing integration of law and policy work by capacity. So we did studies of laws in 3 countries: Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania, and looking at different laws and how they would support adaptation activities in these countries. We looked at issues that are being dealt with by these laws and what are the needs, gaps, and suggesting way to improvement. This work is not really accomplished, but we have gotten the reports, and we are at the stage where we're trying to integrate them, doing kind of comparative study. The results. This presentation that I'm doing here is trying to give amalgamated findings, general findings of the studies, and as they are at the moment. We are trying to get the governments of these countries to accept these reports. So, as we all know, maybe in the past, climate change has always been there. But in the past few years, maybe 10, 15 years, well, maybe 20 years, this issue has been coming up to the attention of the greater society that is man-made, and the impacts are more today than how they were maybe 100, 200 years ago. So there's general need to improve the capacity and expertise and administrative capacity, and to get better laws and policies that will help. And at the moment, they are considered to be weak. That was the premise. We also thought that biodiversity and natural resources policy and laws are not prepared to facilitate climate change, adaptation, and mitigation, because it was not an issue for many years when these laws were being built or developed. Generally, there is no standalone climate change policy in any of these countries when we thought because of course, again, it's a recent phenomenon. The climate change issues are not mainstreamed into the national development planning process. And for example, in Tanzania, we have national strategy for growth and reduction of poverty and other sectoral policies. So this issue was considered a kind of the need. And the gaps, because there's a lack of capacity and understanding of climate change in almost all key personnel from government institutions. But this is a kind of a general statement. It doesn't mean that people don't have capacity. There are people with this capacity. But if you look at the multiple sectors that this climate change may impact, they always find the gaps. There's a Ministry of Environment. People may be very strong in understanding of the issues of climate change, but in certain ministries or certain government institutions, this may be lacking. But also, it's true even for the private sector. It's also true for institutions like CSOs. There are CSOs which have interest and have good, strong knowledge in climate change. But there are CSOs that whatever their activities may be affected by climate change, but the capacity of understanding is weaker. Funds for collecting and implementing adaptation policy studies are limited. So the question of adapting laws is becoming slow and constrained because of the inavailability of funds. And here, the bullet number 3 sectoral example from Tanzania, the Environment Management Act, lays out a medical principle which could support climate change adaptation, but there's generally lack of capacity to enforce the provision of the Act in Tanzania. So as I say, the ministry that deals with the environment has this kind of strength, but enforcing the law is again another challenge. The process of developing national climate change strategy has been slow and not open to stakeholders' participation. There's a process of developing national climate change strategy, and but the thing is just being handled by the government itself, and not much participation of that. The policy and legal framework is inadequate to respond to the requirement of climate change adaptation. This is again a general statement. It's not. One thing that people find that the studies also show that there are barriers to public participation because of unclear regulations, especially with regards to cost and benefit sharing mechanism. And these are the issues of engaging into the adaptive activities or even mitigation for that matter. Activities like RED. There is no standalone policy. I think this is a repetition, I'm sorry, but again, of course, but there exist some strategies, programs, and policies that could help in directing and coordinating efforts. So in all these countries, though there is no this standalone climate change policy, but there are instruments that could be used to help in adaptation in a way. So these studies in 3 countries looked at implementation of multilateral environmental agreements or the global policies or legislations. And there are different, in those 3 countries there has been different findings. For instance, in inadequate capacity to update national legislation in conformity with international treaties, that when the treaties come up, when the government sign, it doesn't mean that they immediately put them into their law. So it's a really slow process. Inadequate funding of Zambia Law Development Commission. So that's another weakness. In Mozambique, they found that one of the potential challenges is to try to put climate change as a legal instrument. So included, of course, in the legal systems. Capacity building, training, and financial resource. Basically, there it means it's inadequate. Publication or disclosure of activities on climate change or the activities that may impact on climate change. It's not, unless people follow up, there's not beforehand information processes that this is kind of investment is happening. And in Tanzania it was looked at as there are instruments like National Action Plan on Adaptation, but their own National Action Plan on Biodiversity. And the thought was these are all ambitious, that they have many activities, but then the implementation was not as timely. And some of them have expired and need to be reviewed. Time has passed, and though they were developed, but they were never implemented. So this is where the question of being ambitious comes in. Again, as I said earlier, awareness on mayor is there, but it's within an institution that is dealing with the environment. So there's inadequacy of understanding of our multilateral governmental agreements beyond the ministry that is dealing with the environment directly. These countries, in terms of laws, what they have done was some few things can be considered to be achievements. And this includes the development of National Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, as a development of National RED and Strategy and Action Plan. This is included, though the RED is not adaptation issue, but it's an achievement in a way. Development of National Adaptation Program of Actions. As I said, they were developed, but the question is, were they really implemented? In Zambia, there's a National Climate Change Response Strategy, which is also valuing the role of ecosystems in adapting to climate change. So it's kind of the nature plus kind of thinking is included there. There's a great general public policy shift among relevant land-based sectors towards applying the ecosystem approach. So you can see, like, as I said, kind of contradictions within these statements, but it's a fact. There has been this move to include the climate change in policies, but it has not happened as it was required. But of course, the thinking is there. The report recommends that courts invoke environmental principle and environmental laws, because there is no legislation, and the researchers here thought maybe it's good that there has to be some instruments that make law as an interpretive device on climate change adaptation cases. The guy who wrote this is a lawyer, so I don't know, maybe the lawyers in this house will better understand this statement. And with reforms, some of the existing policies and strategies for the biodiversity and social management have potential to provide guidance and strategies for climate change. So basically, this is encouraging to use the existing instruments and adapt them to the climate change issues. Invest in expert knowledge, use practical experience to generate lessons and acquire technical equipment to climate change monitoring and interpretation. Basically, it's continued investment in improving technical capacity in a short note here. The process of reviewing policy and legal framework is always to incorporate has started in that this should be meaningfully supported, that it has to move fast, and this includes investment in terms of funds and expertise. The support should include climate change response strategy development processes so that it synchronizes and progresses. It could be climate change response strategy or whatever the title that could be used. This was taken from Zambia, but assist with the development of a policy and legal framework that will facilitate adaptation to climate change, considering the progression of climate change response in national and district development plans and planning processes. So here is basically it means development plans should consider the issue of climate change as a necessary imperative. Support the implementation of the policies and enforcement of the law, at least on pilot basis. Thank you very much. I hope I kept the time.
Were there any questions for? No?
Confused? Okay, there's no question. question. Thank you very much. I think I talked the ordinary.
So our next presentation, it's on legal preparedness for achieving the IUCN targets relevant to climate change, adaptation, and UNFCCC vision. And I think this is a Tete,
yes,
or duo
someone that you
from Frederick and Miranda.
Okay. Well, we're here today to present a project that we've been working on with the UN CBD Secretariat for the last year. That's going to develop kind of an analytical tool on biodiversity laws and how that is actually quite linked, as Elisa has mentioned this morning, to climate change adaptation. First, just a general introduction of the International Development Law Organization. We're an intergovernmental organization that for the past 25 years has worked on rule of law and governance issues. And when Carl earlier was saying the idea that rule of law is important in sustainable and equitable development is something new to the community in general. It's actually something that is new as well to this organization that has been working on rule of law and justice reform. And over the last 10 years, we've been developing programming on sustainable development. We've been working on climate change initiatives and green economy initiatives. And this is where the program under biodiversity falls in quite nicely, along with our climate change adaptation work. So, as Abdallah was just talking about, we also have a legal preparedness for REDD+ studies that look at also Zambia and other leading countries around the world that have come to IDLO and said, we need legal guidance on these issues that are emerging, and we're gathering and supporting these programs in these areas. If you're looking there, we have our in-country programs. We've highlighted Juba, Kabul, Nairobi, and that highlights kind of our traditional rule of law areas, but we have been moving in the last 10 years into the middle income countries where we're seeing programming in leading countries like Vietnam, where we have MOUs with them on their climate change issues. Also in Mexico and in Kenya. And so some of the work that we're doing there is just going to be highlighted by Fred today, who's been leading our legal research on this Aichi Biodiversity Target project. So I'll pass it on to him.
Thank you, Yolanda. I'd like to just highlight this one web link that I put on the side. I don't know that it's quite large enough, but it's cbd.int/sp/targets. Which is where you can find online the full list of the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets. So the /SP is strategic plan of the Convention on Biodiversity. So the targets are a subset of that. And in this presentation today, I'm actually only going to focus on 3 of them. Our legal research initiative actually focuses on 8 distinct targets. However, I thought that these 3 happen to be the most relevant for the discussion today, and they happen to be the ones where we have the most research done presently. So the third Aichi target actually has to do with reducing, eliminating, reforming incentives that are harmful to biodiversity, and also creating positive incentives that promote conservation and sustainable use. Specifically in harmony with the CBD and other international obligations. So that might be thought as a link to maybe the World Trade Organization and developing subsidies and initiatives and reforming subsidies, but I think that it also has something to say in relationships with the other Rio conventions, like the UN Convention on Climate Change. So when we're talking about creating these incentives, I think that there are actually a lot of links between incentive reform and creation of positive incentives for biodiversity under Aichi Target 3 and measures for climate change adaptation. So just extremely basic points. A lot of incentives that currently exist are actually driving climate change and also biodiversity loss. So we also have examples in legal systems where we do have positive incentives that exist for conservation and sustainable use, and they're actually fairly successful. And so our main intent at this point is to assist parties in this project to adopt laws and reform laws that help meet this target. But I think in terms of our discussion here today, we'll have some questions near the very end as to how we can actually kind of synchronize these. There's no reason why the implementation of the CBD and the implementation of the UN framework on climate change should happen somehow separately or in different silos. I was quite happy to see that Dr. Norquera this morning talked about the linkages between the Rio Conventions and implementing the Rio Conventions concurrently, and trying to see different usage of terms that actually relate to the same principle. So we've taken a few laws that we had suggested by researchers. Luckily, the IDLO actually has an in-country network of legal alumni and in-country lawyers. So with the Center for International Sustainable Development Law, we're trying to work with in-country lawyers to do studies of potential legal best practices, followed up by case studies on these laws and how they were developed, who the main stakeholders were, how we could kind of promote this in other countries. So a couple of the examples that we have for incentives